Revealed how a billionaire's shocking act at the hospital led to his incredible downfall. A paramedic's fight for justice. Jake, a 28-year-old paramedic in the heart of Chicago, shook off the biting cold of winter as he stepped into the hospital's chaotic emergency room. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, illuminating his weary face, which bore the tales of countless midnight calls and urgent rescues. His mother's illness weighed heavy on his chest, a constant reminder of the struggles his family faced. Generations of his kin had dedicated themselves to serve the community, but the sobering reality of the healthcare system often felt like quicksand beneath his feet. Tonight, the atmosphere was thick with anxiety. Families whispered prayers and clung to each other, their wide eyes searching for hope as they anticipated news of their loved ones. Suddenly, the calm before the storm shattered like glass. Victor Caldwell, a billionaire known for his lavish philanthropy, stormed into the waiting room like a king surveying his domain. The noise fell silent, the air thick with indignation as he shoved past a distraught mother cradling her son, unaware of the pain he was inflicting with every entitled stride. Jake felt his heart race, his fists clenching at his sides. "Hey," he called out, forcing the word through gritted teeth. The opulence of Victor's tailored suit contrasted sharply with the worn jeans Jake had thrown on in haste. "There are people here who need help." His voice echoed like an alarm, stirring the crowd as resentment bubbled beneath the surface. Victor turned, his gaze dripping with disdain. "Do you think I have time for this? Do you even know who I am?" His words cut through Jake like a knife, igniting a fierce fire in his belly. "Yes, I know exactly who you are," Jake countered, his voice steadier than he felt. "You represent everything wrong with our system. You push past family suffering because of your wealth while we're fighting to get basic care for our loved ones." Electricity surged through the waiting room. People began to whisper, some nodding in agreement, others hiding their faces in fear of reprisal. The tension swelled to a fever pitch as the truth hung heavy in the air, sparking the realization that the desperate fight for justice wasn't just Jake's, it was theirs too. Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. The fallout from that night hit Jake hard. Whispers turned into rumors, and soon, he found himself ostracized at work. While patients raved about his compassion, the hospital administration, fearing the billionaire's wrath, dismissed him amidst an avalanche of tension. As heartbreak filled his chest, he realized he was being pushed away simply for speaking out. Yet a spark ignited within him. Determined to confront Victor on his own turf, Jake set his sights on the upcoming charity gala, a dazzling event intended to raise funds for underfunded hospitals. As he prepared to face the man who had become the face of their city's divide, anticipation tinged with fear coursed through him. He knew this was his moment to stand not only for his mother, but for every family caught in the wake of injustice. With the gala's opulence twinkling under chandeliers, Jake took a deep breath, zoning in on Victor across the room. This was it. Would his words finally break through the wall of entitlement that loomed so large? As he stepped onto that stage, ready to shine a light on inequality, the atmosphere shifted, and an electric charge filled the air. Would Jake spark the change they all so desperately needed? Or would Victor's wealth and power snuff out his voice yet again? The room pulsed with anticipation. As Jake's sneakers brushed against the polished oak stage, each step felt like an anchor pulling him deeper into the urgency of the moment. The glittering chandeliers above cast him in an almost otherworldly light, but the warmth of their glow did little to ease the chill of confrontation he felt bubbling within. He scanned the crowd, faces bright with hope and the kind of naivety only wealth can instill. Dressed in designer gowns and tuxedos, those attending the gala seemed oblivious to the struggles of the city outside. They had come for luxury, but Jake knew he had a different purpose. This was his chance to tear down the facade anchored by fortunes and privilege. Clearing his throat, Jake gripped the microphone tighter. "Good evening, everyone." His voice rang out, steadier than he felt. Heads turned, eyes widened, and whispers fluttered around him like nervous birds taking flight. "I'm not here to pander to the elite. I'm here because families in this city, families like mine, are hurting." Victor Caldwell stood amidst the crowd, his expression a mask of annoyance, the light from above casting a sharp shadow across his jawline. Jake's heart raced, but he pressed on, recalling the faces of those he had helped and those he couldn't. "We've all seen the glitz and glamour you've heard about the millions raised for hospitals. But what about the people those funds are meant to help? What about my mother? What about the countless others suffering in silence?" The tension in the room shifted, murmurs growing louder, now a mix of discomfort and curiosity. "I am a paramedic. I'm not some underqualified worker you talk about community, and yet, the real heroes go unnoticed. Families are being denied care all because the funds don't reach them." Jake's words poured out, fervent and raw, igniting a familiar fire within him. "Who is holding you accountable? That's what's necessary for change. We need to be open about where these funds go, who gets help, and who gets left behind." The audience's murmurs turned to uneasy silence as Jake turned to face Victor directly. Nervous glances were exchanged as guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "Mr. Caldwell, your foundation might be making donations, but they are merely a band-aid for a system that's deeply broken. Accountability, transparency, that's what we need. The truth can no longer be hidden behind charity events and champagne toasts." Jake's voice boomed through the room, catching the wealthy attendees off guard. He could see a few nodding in agreement, the seeds of a movement beginning to sprout. He felt empowered but also vulnerable, like a lone flame in a stormy night. Victor's jaw tightened, and the once indifferent billionaire narrowed his eyes, clearly feeling challenged. "You're making quite a spectacle of yourself," he called out, his voice dripping with scorn. "This isn't the place for your crusade." But Jake wouldn't back down. "If you think this isn't the place, then you're mistaken. This is exactly where it needs to happen. People are dying while you throw parties. We demand to know where you stand, where you're putting your money. Show us you care beyond the glitzy facade." The atmosphere crackled with tension as if the very air had thickened. Jake could almost see the divide in the crowd, some whispering encouragement, others clenching their teeth at his audacity. Either way, he had ignited something. Before he could take another breath, Victor stepped forward, a storm brewing in his eyes. "You want attention?" He spat, advancing toward the mic. Jake's heart sank. He knew this was only the beginning. What would Victor say, and how would it affect the growing movement behind him? As Victor's lips curled into a threatening smile, Jake had no idea that the battle for justice was only just unfolding. Victor's voice echoed through the grand hall, piercing the tension that enveloped them. "You think this is a game, don't you? You think that shouting in a fancy room like this will change anything?" His tone dripped with condescension, each word a barrage aimed at Jake, yet the crowd's nervous energy shifted, feeling more like a spectator to a brewing storm. Jake's heart pounded as he met Victor's glare, refusing to break eye contact. "No, it's not a game. It's about real lives. It's about people like my mother who are caught in a system that neglects them." The challenge ignited something deep within him, a flicker of hope dancing in the midst of despair. "People?" Victor scoffed, a dismissive wave of his hand cutting through Jake's words. "You think I'm responsible for every sob story in this city? Come on. We give millions to charity every year. You think that makes us blameless?" He stepped closer, the distance shrinking, but the divide remained insurmountable. Behind them, whispers erupted like a wildfire. Guests exchanged glances, uncertainty creasing their features. Some looked shaken, while others wore expressions of outrage. The facade of indifference started to crack. "Your funds might make you feel generous, but they don't change what's broken." Jake pressed on, his voice resonating, the urgency boiling over. "You're just trying to silence me because the truth is sobering. You call it charity, but too often it's just a way to feel good about yourselves." The crowd was restless now, grappling with the wave of Jake's words. He could feel their energy shift, their hearts beginning to pulse with a similar fight for justice. It didn't matter how wealthy or well-dressed they were, they couldn't ignore the pain around them. Victor, clearly losing ground, straightened his posture, forcing a thin smile. "Let us say you make your point," he said, a hint of desperation creeping into his tone. "What is to stop the rest of the system from crumbling if it's just the foundation shaking?" Instead of backing down, Jake leaned in. "Then let that happen. The foundations should shake. Maybe then something good can be rebuilt, built on honesty, built on compassion." The audience murmured in agreement. Emotion surged, and Jake could feel it course through him, emboldening him to fight harder. Every eye now focused on him. He was not just a voice, but the heartbeat of those who sought change, the embodiment of a movement that had been waiting to ignite. Victor's eyes flashed with anger. "You want change? Keep dreaming, kid. This is how the world works." His voice boomed, but the cracks began showing. A few voices from the crowd now shouted support for Jake, urging Victor to listen. "You're wrong," someone called out. "This isn't just about money. It's about people." A ripple spread through the attendees. The fortress of privilege around them seemed to crumble. "Give people a choice," another voice echoed. The crowd built momentum, a tide of realization washing over them. They were not just there to sip wine and dance, they could be part of something bigger. Jake felt electrified. "Together, we can demand transparency from the wealthy. We can hold them accountable." He could sense a shift, a wave of hope rising. But Victor wasn't finished. "You think you're clever? There are consequences to stirring the pot. You better believe I will retaliate." His warning hung in the air like a storm cloud ready to unleash its fury. Jake raised his chin, determination etched on his face. "And I will stand here with my community, ready to take those consequences. Because this," he gestured around him, "this is where change starts." As the crowd erupted into applause, Jake felt elation mingle with an undercurrent of fear. It was working, but at what price? Victor's dark grin loomed in his mind, ominous and foreboding. As the applause faded and the murmurs of support washed over him, Jake realized he had crossed a line. A line that could cost him more than he was prepared to pay. But he couldn't turn back now. What happened next? Would it be liberation or chaos? The stakes had never felt higher. Jake stood there, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. Voices swirled in the air, the applause, the shouts of encouragement, yet somewhere beneath it all, they whispered caution. He felt the energy of the crowd, a collective heartbeat that pulsed with urgency. But mixed with their roar was the ominous shadow of Victor's threat looming over him. People began to rise from their seats. A woman with kind eyes stepped forward, her gaze steady as she locked onto Jake's. "You're speaking for all of us, you know." "Thank you." Her voice carried a sincerity that resonated through the hall, and others nodded, stepping closer, emboldened by her courage. Victor glowered from his spot, the corners of his mouth twisted with disdain. The shift in the energy was undeniable, and Jake could see it reflected in the faces of those around him. They were no longer just observers, they had been transformed into allies. "Take a stand," shouted another voice, echoing through the now energized crowd. "We want to be silenced." The dynamic was shifting, each declaration ignited another, like flames blazing into a wildfire of protest. Jake felt a surge of adrenaline as each voice reminded him that he wasn't alone in this fight. Then, unexpectedly, the hall door swung open with a loud bang. A group of healthcare workers stepped in, still in scrubs, faces weary but alive with determination. They had come straight from their shifts, and the sight of them lifted the atmosphere to new heights. "We are tired of the lies," one of them yelled, raising a hand and drawing the crowd's focus. "We've seen the reality of what's wrong out there. We're with you." The energy now was electric. Jake's heart quickened. The workers' presence reaffirmed everything he had been fighting for. They represented the raw truth, the heart of the community. Victor's face darkened further, visibly shaken by the growing rebellion. "This is madness. You're all foolish to believe this will make a difference." But even as he spoke, Jake could see his confidence crack. "Yes, it will. Jake shouted back, his voice rising above the chaos. Look around you. There's power in our unity. A chorus of agreement erupted from the crowd, every shout fueled by the urgency of shared stories, shared losses, and a shared future. But just as the tide seemed to swell in their favor, Jake remembered Victor's warning. The retaliation lurked like a constant shadow. What could it mean? Loss of jobs? Legal threats? The possibilities churned in his mind, threatening to rear their ugly heads. A man stepped forward, fierce and determined. We have the right to demand better. We won't be pushed around by anyone, not even you, Victor. We want change now. Jake caught Victor's gaze, filled with a mixture of rage and disbelief. This was more than a gathering, it was a movement. Jake could feel it building, the resolve deepening. But the tension in Victor's eyes warned of impending dangers hidden beneath the surface. In that moment, a child tugged at Jake's sleeve. He looked down to see a little girl, no more than 8, her wide eyes glistening with unshed tears. Are you really gonna help my mom? She asked, innocent and trusting. Jake knelt to her level and felt the weight of that question. Yes, he promised, a vow sealed by the energy swirling around them. That's exactly what we'll do. Her small hand squeezed his, the act fueling his determination. What would they face next? And how many would stand by them when the storm finally broke? As he looked around at the faces of his supporters, Jake knew the battle had only just begun. Would this moment mark the start of profound change or spiral into chaos? One thing was clear, they were ready to fight. But would they be ready for what came next? The crowd surged, a living wave of hope and desperation, as Jake turned back to the faces surrounding him. He could see the energy swirling like a whirlwind, each breath taken in shared determination. Their eyes shone with something potent, something that ignited the air. But beneath that electric atmosphere, Jake felt an undercurrent of fear. Victor wouldn't he take this lying down? Before he could gather his thoughts, Victor's voice rang out again, cold and cutting. You think this is some game? His tone dripped with disdain. The real world doesn't bend to your whims, and I will not let you tear apart everything I've built. Jake stepped forward, his voice steady despite the fluttering in his chest. What you've built is crumbling from the inside out, Victor. Your greed has silenced too many. We are not afraid anymore. The crowd roared in response, louder and more unwavering. But as Jake spoke, doubts began to creep into his mind. What if they couldn't win? What if Victor's threats were more than bluster? He could almost hear the scratching sounds of the gears turning in Victor's mind as he plotted his next move. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the back of the hall, drawing everyone's attention. A man had knocked over a podium, its metallic frame clanging loudly against the tiled floor. He staggered up, face flushed with anger. You people want change? He yelled, his voice slurred, a hint of alcohol lingering on his breath. You think shouting will fix things? You're all fools. A murmur of discontent passed through the crowd. Jake felt the first ripple of uncertainty. The man continued, eyes wild. This is just a fantasy. Look at us. Look at what we've become. Silencing him, Jake raised a hand. No, listen. Sometimes a spark is all it takes. We've been sitting in silence for too long. It's time we make noise. He felt the resurgence of strength behind him, the crowd rallying around his words. The little girl by his side tugged again at his sleeve. Are you sure? Will you help us? The tremble in her voice wrapped around his heart like a vice. Absolutely, Jake said, his voice firm. He could feel the tears welling in his own eyes, threatening to spill over. For you, for your mom, for everyone here. We will fight together. The child smiled, a bright flash of innocence amid the chaos. But that smile couldn't chase away the shadow he saw flicker across Victor's face. The billionaire's lost composure threatened to erupt, and the tension was unbearable. We'll see how far your little movement goes, Victor hissed, confidence returning with a sinister glint in his eyes. I will destroy anyone who stands in my way. His fingers flexed as if merely imagining the power he clung to could vanquish the collective while unfolding before him. The air thickened with anxiety, the crowd still anxious about what might follow. But Jake held the little girl's hand, feeling the warmth of her small fingers, a tether against the rising tide of dread. There would be retribution. But he couldn't back down. "Let us show him the strength of our voices," he shouted, igniting the crowd once more. They surged forward, a tidal wave of courage clashing against the rising tide of Victor's threats. Just then, a figure stepped into the spotlight. An older man, ideally dressed, with a badge glimmering under the lights. In that instant, Jake's heart sank. This was the last thing he expected. The hospital director, his expression unreadable. "My friends," the director spoke, voice steady despite the chaos surrounding him. "We need to talk." What would he say? Would he stand in support or further push Victor's agenda? Jake's heart raced, questions swirling. The moment felt momentous, and he had no idea how it might turn. Fingers still linked with the little girl, Jake inhaled deeply, the fear rushing in, pushing every character to the front of his mind. What would this encounter mean for their fight? "Jake," the director said, raising his hands to quell the crowd's unrest. "I come to you not as an enemy, but as someone who understands the stakes of this moment." His eyes swept the hall, pausing on each person as if measuring their resolve. Jake's heart hammered against his ribs. "Then why are you here?" he called back, unsure whether to trust the man in front of him. "Are you going to side with Victor? Please, just hear me out." The director's voice cut through the tension, urgent and pleading. "Victor has influence, yes. But he also has vulnerabilities. The truth is, your fight is my fight too. I've watched him exploit people for years." He paused, searching for the right words. "And I want to let him destroy this community. Not anymore." A wave of murmurs broke out in the crowd. Jake felt torn. A flicker of hope had ignited, but the shadows of doubt still lingered. What if this was another trap? The little girl squeezed his hand, her small fingers tightening as if sensing the unease swirling around them. "Will it be okay, Mr. Jake?" Her voice was soft, innocent. Jake knelt beside her, looking into those wide, trusting eyes. "I want it to be. We're here for you, and that means we'll fight harder." He turned back to the director. "What do you propose?" The director straightened, taking a deep breath as if bracing for the impact of what he would say next. "I can gather evidence, information on the deals Victor has made. We need to expose him, not just to the people, but to the authorities. This can't be just about noise anymore. Real action is necessary." Tension soaked into every corner of the hall. Jake could see people whispering, grappling with the possibilities. "And who would believe you?" someone shouted from the back. "You're part of the system." The director nodded, accepting the challenge. "I understand your skepticism. Trust is hard-earned, especially in our situation. But I can show you the truth." He pulled out a flash drive, holding it above his head like a lifeline. "This contains everything: financial records, transactions that reveal Victor's corruption. It's time to shine a light on his darkness." The crowd reacted, some leaning forward, hungry for change, while others stood back, arms crossed. Resentment and hope warred within each person, and Jake felt the weight of each heart beating around him. "Will this really make a difference?" a woman shouted, shaking her head. "What if it just leads to more danger?" "Your bravery has already paved the way," the director replied, his voice filled with conviction. "The truth pulls people together, even in the face of danger. We must act now before it's too late." A swell of agreement began to ripple through the crowd, fueled by anger and a burgeoning sense of unity. Jake glanced back at the little girl, who was watching with wide eyes. If they didn't act, what would life be like for her? "We fight for everyone here," Jake called out, raised fists echoing his resolve. "We don't just make noise. We ignite change." The crowd erupted in a chorus, cries of support rising and folding over each other, a symphony of defiance. Yet, amidst the rising tide, Jake felt a chill settle over him. Victor wouldn't sit idle. "Whatever you plan to do, make it quick," Victor had warned, and now those words echoed menacingly in his mind. As he locked eyes with the director, a surge of determination washed over him. "Let us expose Victor," he declared, fists clenched. "But we need a plan. We need to gather our strength." Just then, the lights flickered, plunging the hall into darkness for a heartbeat, and a loud crash resounded outside, the sound reverberating like thunder. What was that? The crowd fell silent, panic rising again. Jake's heart raced. Was this the blowback of their newfound courage? He pointed to the door, determination flashing in his eyes. Stay together. We can't back down now. As the lights flickered back on, they revealed the chaos unfurling outside. Shadows danced as sirens wailed in the distance. The stakes were rising, and Jake could sense the storm approaching. Would their voices be enough to weather it? With the crowd in a frenzy, Jake knew they were on the brink of something monumental, but he also felt the encroaching dread of Victor's retribution creeping closer than ever. What would it take to stand against a man like Victor? And were they truly ready for the fight that lay ahead? The chaos outside swelled, a storm of confusion and fear. Jake felt the air thicken as the crowd began to stir, uncertainty crackling like electricity. He raised his hands again, trying to soothe the panic blooming in their faces. Listen, he shouted over the din. Now's not the time to fall apart. We need to stay united, focus on the plan. He caught a glimpse of the director beside him, who nodded, his expression serious and resolute. We have what we need to take Victor down, but we must act with precision. The director stepped forward, his voice booming through the noise. We need teams to distribute this evidence. I suggest we split into groups, each focused on a different approach. A man at the front stepped forward, wearing a rugged denim jacket. What if Victor gets wind of this? We could be putting ourselves in danger. His skepticism echoed in the uneasy murmur that spread through the group. Fear is what he thrives on, the director replied. But we've faced fear before. Look at where we are. If we let him intimidate us, we lose everything. Jake's mind raced, the clock ticking down the moments before Victor would react. The little girl, he murmured to himself, glancing down at her. She stood aghast, uncertainty etched on her tiny features, clutching the hem of her shirt. He's right, Jake affirmed, returning to the crowd, heart pounding. This fight isn't just for us. It's for her and for every person Victor has wronged. We must be the change. Behind him, a woman shouted, then let us do it. We need to show Victor we're not scared anymore. The crowd was starting to shift, waves of resolve washing over them. Jake encouraged that energy, raising his voice even higher. We need to be smart. Let us split up. Some can document everything, others can start contacting the media. Who can help with that? Jake felt a surge of energy as hands shot up, and he felt a collective heartbeat, a community of determined souls, readying themselves for battle. In the confusion, another crash rang out, echoing through the hall. Jake's stomach dropped. We have to move. Now. He ushered the crowd toward the exits, their fear replaced by a fierce determination. As they filed out of the building into the chaos, Jake's heart raced with the adrenaline coursing through him. Sirens wailed in a primal tune that echoed the urgency of their mission. Over there. The director pointed to a nearby alleyway, a narrow escape route that cut through the thick tension in the air. Let us meet back there in 5 minutes. We'll regroup. With a nod, Jake led the way, the small girl still at his side, heart pounding in time with the rhythm of their resolve. Would this gambit lead them to safety, or was it a path straight into Victor's trap? They entered the alley, a momentary refuge from the chaos, and the sound of the world faded away for just a second. Jake crouched down before the girl, looking into her eyes with urgency. Stay close. This is going to get loud. With her nod, he felt a warmth in his chest, a tiny flicker of hope. But that hope came wrapped in the harsh reality of what lay ahead. Suddenly, a shadow passed overhead, and Jake's breath caught in his throat. Across the alley, a familiar figure stepped into view. It was Victor, flanked by his men, a wicked smile curling on his lips. Well, what do we have here? Victor called, his voice slicing through the tension like glass. The very air felt charged with danger. Jake's heart raced, realization dawning. They weren't just fighting for exposure anymore, they were fighting for their lives. Don't move, Jake shouted, stepping protectively in front of the little girl. But as he faced Victor, he couldn't shake the feeling that this moment was only the beginning of a much larger storm brewing on the horizon. What would they do next? Would their courage hold against the fierce winds of Victor's wrath? Jake's body tensed as Victor's eyes locked onto his, that sinister grin pushing back any thoughts of retreat. The men surrounding Victor shifted nervously, clearly sensing the tension in the air. It was as if time slowed, every heartbeat magnified in the silence that followed. He stood firm, grounded by the weight of the little girl behind him. Her tiny hand gripped his jacket, and he could feel her heart pounding against his back. They were in this together, he couldn't let her down. "We don't want any trouble, Victor," Jake said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Just let us go. You don't want this to escalate." Victor chuckled, a dark, unsettling sound. "Oh, but I do. You really think you can defy me? You're not in control here." The men flanking him smirked, but Jake could see the flicker of doubt in their eyes. They were all in this for one thing: power. And Jake realized something vital. Victor thrived on fear, but that fear could crack, break even, given the right push. "Listen, we have proof, real evidence of your corruption. This can't end well for you," Jake called out, his voice rising, a surge of defiance filling him. The truth was their weapon, but would it be enough? Victor narrowed his eyes. "You think you can intimidate me with scraps of paper? If you're going to fight, make it worth my while. Because I assure you, I'm not some minor opponent you can bluff." Behind Jake, the crowd had started to murmur, confusion creeping back in. Fear threatened to sting at their resolve once more. He felt like he was standing on the edge of a precipice, and one wrong move could send them all crashing down. "No." Jake turned slightly, his voice fierce. "We cannot let him wear us down. Remember why we're here. For her, for everyone he has hurt. We have to stand tall together." As the words left his lips, he felt an energy shift in the crowd, pushing back against uncertainty. He knew the stakes were high. It wasn't just about their safety anymore. It was about taking a stand against someone who had wrought havoc for too long. Victor, sensing the sudden uprising of courage, stepped closer, eyes glinting with malicious glee. "You think emotional appeals will save you? I've taken down bigger men than you, and I won't hesitate to squash any rebellion." That insidious confidence in Victor's tone made Jake's stomach twist. But he made a choice. "Then come at us. You'll see we're not backing down." The crowd rallied behind Jake, courage ignited like wildfire. Jake felt his heart swell, his voice ringing with fierce determination. "Let us show him the truth." As their collective resolve built, Victor's expression soured. The men behind him exchanged glances, unease creeping upon their confident facade. Then, without warning, Victor raised his hand, signaling his men. "You want to play hardball? Very well. But know this: every ounce of pain you think you've suffered will pale in comparison to what's coming next." A pit settled in Jake's stomach, the real danger closing in, but the resolve around him sparked a fire of hope against the looming threat. "Stay strong," he cried, locking eyes with the little girl, who now held his gaze with something akin to courage. He had taken a stand, they all had. In that moment of unity, a loud crack jolted through the air. A scuffle echoed from the mouth of the alley, drawing both their attention. Jake's heart raced. What now? Was help on the way, or had they inadvertently walked into a trap? Victor's men seemed equally alert, exchanging knowing looks. "We might be outnumbered, but we are not outmatched," Jake whispered to the girl, feeling the energy shift once again. The battle lines were drawn. His mind swirled with questions. Could this be the tipping point? Was there a hidden ally in the fray, or was the storm just beginning to gather strength? As Jake braced for impact, he could almost hear the sound of destiny approaching, waiting with bated breath for the next move. The scuffle grew louder, the unmistakable sound of chaos bubbling over. It was as if the world around them had twisted into a short moment of suspense, anticipation hanging thick in the air. Jake could hear the shuffling of feet, the dull impact of bodies colliding, and his heart raced with a mix of fear and adrenaline. He turned to face the direction of the noise, gripping the little girl's hand tighter. "Stay close," he murmured, ready to shield her from whatever might come next. Victor's men shifted, some glancing nervously back towards their boss, others inching forward with crude weapons poised. Jake could see their confidence wavering, the bravado slipping as the commotion grew fiercer. Maybe they weren't as intimidating as they wanted everyone to believe. Suddenly, a dark figure burst into view from the alley, slamming into one of Victor's men and sending him sprawling to the ground. Jake squinted through the haze of tension. Who was this person fighting alongside them? With a fierce growl, the newcomer wrestled another thug to the ground. Jake's heart surged. They had help. The crowd began to rally again, the feeling of unity rising to meet the chaos, fueling their courage. "It's Sam," someone called from the back, relief flooding the crowd as recognition of the unexpected ally spread like wildfire. Sam, a local activist and fierce advocate against Victor's regime, had stepped into the ring. Jake felt his spirit lift. "Let us push," he shouted, feeling a sense of urgency fuel his words. "Let us make a stand." The crowd surged forward, emboldened by Sam's arrival, and they began to close the distance towards Victor and his dwindling crew. Victor's confidence began to crack under pressure. He scowled at Sam, fury etched on his face. "You think he can save you?" He spat, but even his words lacked the power he usually carried. With a mighty roar, the crowd surged. Jake felt the energy of those around him, the unified front surging forward as they pressed against Victor's men. The chaos of the alley became a whirlwind of arms and legs, shouts and cries for justice. It was like a storm, unrelenting, fierce, and unstoppable. Jake's eyes darted, searching for the little girl, making sure she was still behind him amid the tumult. As he turned, he saw her standing tall, a spark of fire igniting within her eyes. She was no longer just a frightened child, she was a fighter, just like the rest of them. "You can't win, Victor," she yelled, her small voice echoing through the din. With a swift movement, Jake pulled a discarded metal pipe from the ground, feeling its weight in his hands. If they were going to do this, they needed to be prepared. He glanced at Sam, who had fought his way through the crowd, determination gleaming in his eyes. "We've got your back," Sam shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos as he threw a punch, landing a strike against Victor's thugs. The alley was filling up with voices, shouts of defiance, cries of hope. And for the first time, Jake could see the look of fear creeping into Victor's expression. The tide was turning, the power dynamic shifting, and it felt glorious. But just as hope began to blossom, a heavier presence emerged from the shadows. The last thing Jake expected was for reinforcements to arrive, not for Victor, but for the desperate families rallying around him. He caught a glimpse of cars pulling up, lights glaring, and a convoy of unknown figures ready to descend on the scene. Jake felt the air grow stale. They weren't done yet. "Keep fighting," he roared, locking eyes with Sam, who nodded, understanding the stakes. However, deep down, Jake's heart sank. Who were these new arrivals? Would they tip the balance back toward Victor? As Jake felt the weight of the moment press down, he took a breath. The battle was revving up, and the real fight was only just beginning. What would happen next? Who would emerge victorious in this unpredictable turmoil? As uncertainty loomed like dark clouds above them, Jake steeled himself for the true confrontation ahead, knowing that this battle could change everything. Jake felt the adrenaline surge through him like a wildfire as the headlights mingled with the chaos. The clarity of his purpose steadied him amidst the tremors of uncertainty. This wasn't just a fight for recognition, it was a battle for every family hurt by the selfishness of a few. If they could stand firm together, perhaps they could make this moment matter. "Form a line," he shouted, rallying the crowd. "We need to push together. United." The urgency built, and he could see people adjusting their stances, determination etched on their faces. The tension was palpable, like electricity coursing through the air. He glanced back at Sam, who was still locked in tussles with some of Victor's men. "Sam, we need a distraction," Jake shouted over the noise of the struggle. "On it," Sam yelled back, and in a flurry of movement, he leapt forward, creating a diversion among Victor's crew. With the chaos shifting in their favor, Jake took stock of the crowd. Families, friends, healthcare workers, they were all ready to fight, to reclaim their narrative. Victor stepped back, realizing the tide had turned. His face contorted with disbelief, a grotesque mask of fury and desperation. "You think this is over?" he snarled, eyes darting between the crowd and the newcomer menacingly approaching. You have no idea who you're up against. But Jake felt something deeper spark in his chest. And you have no idea what we're capable of. He fired back, brandishing the metal pipe. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about hope, about healing, about bringing justice for everyone pushed aside. He turned to the crowd, now our chance. With a collective surge, they charged together a moving wave of defiance, tearing through the remnants of Victor's throng. The light beaming from the convoy grew brighter, and responses from the police sirens echoed ominously, but Jake didn't falter. They were inching closer to confronting Victor face to face, and he couldn't let that chance slip away. In the confusion, a voice broke through from the arriving figure's police. "Stand down." It was a command that rang clear. Emergency vehicles poured into the alley, officers stepping forward, confusion mingling with authority. Victor's men froze, caught between retreat and loyalty, but something shifted. The idea of reprisal was suddenly too real. With the sight of approaching law enforcement, fear flickered visibly across Victor's face, and he waved his crew back, realizing that even his wealth and influence would struggle to protect him now. "Let us expose him," Jake shouted again, the flames of anger fueling every word. "This is our chance." The little girl, emboldened by the swelling fight around her, raised her tiny voice. "He can't hurt us if we stand together." The crowd responded with a cheer, their voices harmonizing in a beautiful, raw chorus calling for justice against oppression. The police moved in closer, eager to assess the situation and control the chaos. Victor glared at Jake, anger burning in his eyes, contempt oozing from every move. But in that moment, Jake sensed the shift had fully happened. The chaos of the alley transformed into a choir of voices that demanded to be heard. "He is corrupt," a member of the crowd shouted, holding the evidence of Victor's wrongdoings high in the air. "Look at what he has done to us. Look at our lives." The energy crescendoed. The police began to separate Victor from his men, creating a barrier that affirmed the crowd's strength. Jake felt a mix of fear and eloquent joy. This was a moment of reckoning. He turned, feeling the weight of the little girl's trust in him. "We will not be silenced," he declared, hoisting the pipe high. "Every single person here deserves a voice. Our suffering will not be in vain." Soon, people began talking to the officers, voices coming together to recount their stories, weaving a powerful narrative, the narrative of the rejected, the fighting families, the children without their needs met. Each word seemed to chip away at Victor's power, and Jake could see the billionaire faltering, recognition dawning that his fortress was crumbling beneath him. As the police gathered the evidence and requested statements, Jake caught a glimpse of relief in the crowd. Hope bloomed small but brilliant, and in that moment, he knew they had struck a chord. Victor attempted to push back, but the cops were wise to his schemes. As they pulled him away, a murmur broke through from the onlookers, power shifting palpably in favor of the oppressed. "We're tired of pretending this is normal," someone shouted, and agreement surged around them. The moment hung in the air, powerful and intoxicating. The realization of their collective voice transcended the slight vibrations of fear that remained. The police lined them, creating a barrier against Victor's threats. Jake felt grounded by unity, anchored by their fight for change. In the aftermath, hope surged. As Victor was led away, embarrassment dripping from his every stride, Jake caught the little girl's eye once more. "You did it," she said, her voice full of innocence yet wrapped in the heavy weight of reality. "No," Jake replied, kneeling to meet her gaze. "We did it." They had faced uncertainty and found strength, illuminated by the belief of a unified community ready to ignite change. As they left the chaos behind and emerged onto the streets, filled with bright city lights, Jake felt the pull of something great turning, an ember revitalized into a flame. No longer would they endure the shadow of the powerful. Ahead, a new path awaited, a road where truth and unity could triumph. And that was just the beginning. If you stand with us, don't wait another second. Subscribe immediately to our channel to not miss the next exclusive stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and show your support. Comment your reactions and feelings about this powerful ending. And share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformation. Only true fans understand the importance of standing up for what's right.